take you far away. You'd like a holiday.
It's a freaking 990, man.
Take you far away. You'd like a holiday. They changed the corners.
Okay, everybody, welcome back down to the shop tonight. Tonight we are going to go through frame inspection, and we've got a few questions people wanted to ask tonight, so we're going to go over those towards the end here. We're going to take a few minutes to inspect this frame. We've looked at it already ourselves. We found some problem areas. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge for us, but I think we can deal with the problems. First thing is, before you before you do anything with this frame, you want to inspect it before you sandblast it, because if you sandblast the frame first, you remove all the paint, and paint can tell you a lot about where there might be cracks or stresses or where things have been bent or moved. So you always want to inspect it before you sandblast it and repaint it, okay? Now, starting off with this frame, you'll notice this frame is a cradle style frame. The motor is inside, and it has an attached rear subframe, okay? This particular model is not removable. A lot of times, if you have an aluminum frame, they have a removable subframe, and if it gets bent, you can replace the subframe. This frame, you cannot do that because it's part of the whole member. Now, first thing you want to do is you want to start from one side, top or bottom, whatever you want to do, and systematically look around the whole frame, okay? So I just take a general glance over the whole thing, look for any major signs of impact, dents, major things that just look not symmetrical, and when you find those things, then kind of make a note of it so when you get into a little bit more detail you can address that area. I like to first look at the head tube. The head tube is right here. You're going to look for stress cracks around the head tube. You want to look for welds that are broken, any bends that look abnormal, and you look on both sides, especially underneath. When they crack, oftentimes it will be underneath them. This head tube is fine. Then you're going to follow down the cradle, and you're going to look for any obvious signs of cracking or breaking. And I've looked this over, and both the cradles look pretty good. So that's a nice, good, stable starting point. Now on this bike, you probably saw in the last video, I was just beating the crap out of the side of this frame. The reason is one of the previous riders hit this protector piece on the frame right here and bent it up so high that we couldn't get one of the motor mount bolts out. We'd try to pull it out and it would hit right here. So I had to beat that back down, and you can tell the paint has been chipped off around the welds here. That's a good indicator that it's been moved or bent. So I'm going to definitely bend that back down straight, but I won't do it until after it's been sandblasted. So you want to look at motor mounts, make sure that there's no cracks in the motor mounts, and all of these look just fine. You want to check around your foot peg mounts. This one is part of the frame. It looks good. There's no obvious cracks there. This wearing away of the paint is all very normal. It's part of just boots rubbing on the side, and we don't worry about that. We look at the kickstand bracket, make sure that the kickstand bracket is nice and stable looking and not looking like it's bent. You can tell on this kickstand that this part right here and the back side right here, which is kind of hard to see, has been widened. It's been bent open, and that makes that kickstand really loose. And the back of the kickstand is actually rubbed on the subframe, so we're going to have to get that addressed. Over here on this side, as we go back, this bracket right here that the foot peg attaches to, I could not see any obvious bends or breaks in that. It's removable. We're going to of course sandblast that whole area, so we'll deal with that later. But so far, basically the whole basic frame part is pretty good, except for this little piece right here that we're going to have to bend back down. You can heat it up first to do that if you want to. You know, I usually will just bend it back down. But so now we get back onto the subframe, which is this section right here, and there's a few pretty major obvious things wrong with this one that we're going to have to address. First of all, you can see this bracket right up here. that goes between the two subframe rails. This is really common. It's been all bent up, and that's probably because one of the former riders bent the subframe and he tried to straighten it himself. There's a crack right here that you can see between where it goes all the way through from the top through the back. It's still attached in the front, but you can tell that's definitely not factory. The other thing that you can tell is right back here, there's a little broken tab right here, and I've actually, when I was taking the seat off, saw that hanging there, and I grabbed it and hung on to it because that needs to be welded back on and aligned properly. The other thing you can tell, the previous owner cut off these back bars on the subframe. Not a big deal there. I'm going to wait till I get the rear fender set up, and I'm going to cut those off cleanly, and I'm going to build a bracket back here that might support racks or something in the future, so I'm not worried about that. Now the other thing that is quite a problem and is common on these bikes, and it's really hard to know unless you strip it down like this to look. Most people don't even care, they just ride it anyway. And that is this rear subframe is bent. And I'm going to show you how to check that. You use a string and you tie it around the head tube like we've done, and then you simply use your eye and you line it up along the seam that goes down the down tube on the front of the frame. And you can just kind of line that string up with that seam, which puts it right in the middle of the bike, and then you can measure from side to side to see how this is moved. And if you come around to the back, you're going to notice, if your eye's level, you're going to notice that this part of the subframe is down compared to this side. You can see how this is lower. And when that happens, when that bends down like this, the whole subframe will move to the right. Whichever side goes down, it'll move to the opposite direction. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have Rojo here hold on to the string and line it up, and then I'll kind of show you from a few different angles how you can see the spacing is different, and we want to try to restore that back to its original factory position, at least to the best we can. So it's not going to be easy, but we're going to go ahead and switch up here for just a second and then show you. Now if you line that string up, he's going to eyeball that thing. You can see as I get up closer here that there's less distance, there's my finger, between the string and this part of the subframe compared to this string and that side of the subframe. You can see that it's wider over here, and the measurement difference at the very back of the frame is between the string and that end is about 3.5 inches, and over here it's about 4 1/8. So we know that left side, if you were sitting on the bike, has dropped down and it's shifted to the right. So what we have to do is raise that left side back up and shift it to the left, and then support it there so that it won't bend again, hopefully. Sometimes once they bend like that, unless you support it well, it'll want to bend itself back. So kind of an issue there.
That's what she said.
Yep, that's what she said. Kind of an issue, a little bit concerned about that, but heck, since we've got it apart, let's go ahead and make it right. And I've got an appointment to have it sandblasted. I'm going to take it in on Thursday to do that. And looks like the cost to sandblast a frame is going to be $60 here locally. And you want to leave the head bearing races in the frame when you have it sandblasted so that no damage occurs there. You want to pop out all the little rubber pieces, hang on to those, and then you want to inspect the frame, and anywhere you have in the frame where there's a threaded hole, okay, you want to put a bolt in there. Not tight, just put it down in there so that when they sandblast, they don't fill your frame up with sand that you have to try to shake out and blow out with an air nozzle. So we'll take the kickstand off and all this other paraphernalia to get it ready for sandblasting. But that's how you kind of do a frame inspection. Use lines, whatever you need to try to make sure things are square. Notice obvious problems with it, and then you want to try to do the best you can to fix it. So on the next video, well actually I'm going to sandblast it first and then we'll try fixing it. That's going to take a few days. So on the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to the engine, because we're going to be waiting for the frame for a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to start tearing down the engine from the head down and try to get this cylinder off so that I can send that back to Bill Blue so that he can put a new liner in it. And we'll inspect everything, and we're going to talk about how to measure the piston, how to measure the cylinder, how to measure your clearance, how to inspect the cylinder walls, how to know if there's any taper or anything that might lead you to believe you need to redo the cylinder, and then also the valves. So if any of you guys have questions as far as teardown goes and inspection from the cylinder up, make sure and post that in there, and I'll make a note of it. Oh, there's one other thing. Rob. Sorry, Rob. I just thought of this just now. Rob had a question on what do you inspect when you're looking at a frame where the engine is part of the stressed member. And what that means is there may not be a down tube. You might have a cradle in a frame, kind of like a Ducati, where the engine is actually part of the frame. And really on that, the only thing that's a little bit different is you want to not only inspect the motor mounts on the frame, but you want to inspect the mounts on the motor. Ducatis are classic for, they have a kickstand mount that's right on the case. I had a Ducati 748, and it's common with those, the 996s, where the kickstand actually breaks the magnesium case. And so you want to look at any place on that motor where it attaches to the frame and make sure you don't see any crack marks along in there at all. If you have any question whatsoever, you can take that part in and have it magnafluxed, which is where they put electricity, basically make that part an electromagnet, and they have a dye fluid that they put on there, and it's really easy to see cracks. But for what we're doing here, we're just going to try to straighten this frame ourselves and do the best we can with it. I mean, it's an inexpensive bike, and I kind of expected it to have some problems. So any questions, let me know, and hopefully Thursday we'll get to tearing that thing down, because Bill Blue's waiting for the cylinder. He's got some stuff on order for me, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but we want to get that back there so he can get started. So happy riding, everybody. Rojo Neck, Duff Factor out.
Let me take you far away.